Gene Roddenberry once said, "If man is to survive, he will have learned to take a delight in the essential differences between man and between cultures. He will learn that difference in ideas and attitudes are a delight, part of life's exciting variety, not something to fear." Remember that in 2024. This is the Review of Champions, and I'm your host, Grandmaster. With me is a powerful panel made up of the finest champions Sakar has to offer, so let me introduce them to you. Voice only, we have Mr. Lord Deathman. How are you, man?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Also voice only, the grand old lady of the podcast of champions, Lokismom. How are you tonight?
Feeling old and grand.
That's, yeah. Showing his beautiful face for the first time in this series, Mr. Merv. How are you, man?
Fantastic.
And last but certainly not least, Mr. Taylor First. How are you?
I'm good.
That's good. This is episode 2 of the Star Trek project, where we will be reviewing Star Trek, all of it, in order of release. Sort of. But today, we're going to talk about Star Trek, the original series, season 2. But before we do that, I want to ask you all to help us out. Like and share this video and subscribe to our channel. And if you really can't get enough of us, you can join our ranks. Go to Sakar, sakar.freeforums.net, set up that account, get to know us, and yes, join us in our reviews or podcast or the Star Trek project. We would love to have you on the show. As mentioned before, we will be discussing the 26 episodes of Season 2 of Star Trek, the original series today. I can put in a spoiler warning if you like, but this is so old. If this is being spoiled for you right now, then you have missed something in your life. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. And we're going to start with a new section in the show, a section I'd like to call Grandmaster's Picks. And in Grandmaster's Picks, it is I who gets to go first. And that's I pick 3 episodes, classic episodes, which everybody knows and loves. And we're going to discuss them first before I let the panel give their personal highlights. And, well, we'll be discussing them as well. And then at the end of the day, we have finished all season 2. And today in Grandmaster's Picks, I have picked 3 episodes out of season 2 of Star Trek, the original series. And the 3 are Amok Time, the very first episode of the season, Mirror Mirror, and The Trouble with the Tribbles. I'm going for Merv first. And I picked Merv first because Merv is a special case. Merv has seen the Star Trek movies, as he mentioned on the board, but he never really got into the shows. But he has taken it upon himself to actually start watching the shows while we are doing the Star Trek project. So he has quite a task in front of him. He missed out on the first episode of the Star Trek project, but he's here and he is... I'm just curious, Merv, how is your Trek going so far?
I think it's going well.
Yeah.
I will admit at times, especially during season 1, I know this is season 2, but during season 1, just to recap, there were times where I was like, a little bit of a trudge because some of the pacing was a little slower. I feel like that picked up a lot in season 2. And I think I got to a point where I'm like much more excited for what's next episodically and in an overall sense. And I really think they hit their groove, at least with me, in this season.
Well, I kind of agree with you because in the first season they were really still, as Taylor put it so eloquently, building the ship while in flight or whatever he said. But in season 2 they really settled, and the most important or the most mentioned part of Star Trek: The Original Series is the 3 men, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy that play off each other, and where Kirk is in the middle between emotion portrayed by McCoy and logic, of course, portrayed by Spock, which is one of the very big strengths of Star Trek: The Original Series, in my view. Well, the 3 episodes: Amok Time, Mirror Mirror, The Trouble with the Tribbles. Give me your thoughts as a newbie.
Well, so we'll start with Amok Time. I thought it was a great first episode of this season, which had been mildly spoiled for me when I realized that it was a parody, a premature parody of the episode in Futurama where this same thing happens between Zoidberg and Fry. So, it's funny seeing these things that were the spawn of parodies that I've seen a million times over, but now I'm seeing like the original version, and it's like, no, I've already seen this before, But I really did love it. The leaning into more of Spock in this episode, culturally, I guess, as a Vulcan, was very fun for me. And the battle, the fighting sequences are always great. Mirror Mirror. I guess I'm gonna have to shave my facial hair because apparently somewhere out there's a good version of me and he doesn't have this. So I like that one a lot. But I will admit that does seem like a problem that they keep facing, which is like, and this happens. It seems to happen already quite a bit, where like they kind of face a similar problem just with a different makeup on it. But evil versions of themselves or themselves being corrupted by something seems to be a frequent enough problem that But I really enjoyed this one. I liked that Spock in particular felt almost unchanged. He was kind of like the same exact person, just with facial hair. So that was pretty fun. In The Trouble with Tribbles was just super lighthearted, super fun and cute. And those little fur balls, I mean, they'd probably terrify me in real life, but they were really adorable on the show. So yeah. I really liked all these.
Space Station K9 did have a pest problem. I'm going to your counterpart now, Merv, where you are watching it all for the first time. We have Lokismom, who watched it for the first time when it actually aired. So, yeah, Lokismom, can I have your thoughts on those 3 classic episodes?
Well, yeah, I think particularly the Amok Time, that was, as you say, that really just got into Spock deep, and we got to see his humans, or not really his human side, but his maybe I guess his true Vulcan side, the Vulcan character that centuries of logic and their custom and their religion has covered up. So we see that coming out of him, and then of course breaking there at the very end where then he realizes that Kirk, Jim is still alive, and he swings, and he's got that huge grin on his face. And you really never saw him emotional unless he was under duress from some aliens or something. Then you would see, but that was like him feeling that emotion, and and it was just like a real special moment. I remember that. Remember when that happened. And and you were actually saying, Grandmaster, about the trio aspect. Yeah, it really is. I think this was the first season that DeForest Kelley got front billing on I think he was actually kind of they were sort of equalized at that point, all 3 actors. And so it really went from there. I think they really did become that solid trio that played off each other, or plays off each other. The Tribbles, of course, that was just hilarious. It was just, funny, cute, and it wasn't so serious. And really, looking at it, had a lot of good, funny jokes, and it wasn't, for all of its silliness, it wasn't. It was still enjoyable, and it wasn't, I don't, you wanted to see what happened with the little Tribbles and all. I did feel sort of bad because what happened to those Tribbles that got transported over to the Klingon engine room. I hate to think what happened to them after that. They didn't seem to care once they got them off the ship. But yeah, that one. And then I'm sorry, what was the 3rd episode again? It was
Mirror Mirror.
Mirror Mirror. Yes, of course. Yeah, that was, of course, as you say, this again. You're missing. They're dealing with these tropes. There's only so many stories, plot lines, and whatnot. They have to mix and match them and whatnot. Yeah, and of course I think the famous Spock with the beard. He sort of almost become like, yeah, I wish Spock would have a beard all the time. That, I mean, he really looked good with that beard, up it that way. So yeah, it was just a lot of fun, and I've seen these episodes before, again over time, but yeah, I definitely remember seeing them for the first time, and of course all the science fiction, everything. I'd never been through all those tropes, so all these were just new original stories to me.
Yeah. Taylor, we're talking about bearded Spock later, much later in this series. We will get another bearded Spock in Discovery season 2. Then we will get evil Taylor, by the way, but that's a spoiler for then. Taylor, your thoughts on these 3 classic episodes?
Well, Amok Time is spectacular. We learned so much about Vulcan culture and Vulcan biology. And of course, Nimoy, such a great actor and so subtle. And, we see how he gets his emotions. And I was kind of struck by there's one scene where he actually says he has a dream about Nurse Chapel while he's going through all this stuff. And of course, we see in this episode that Nurse Chapel is totally in love with him. But I love that when we get down there, we see so much about the culture. We see the leader. I can't remember what was her name. I always get her name and the wife's name mixed up. One of them was T'Pring, and the other one was T'Pol. T'Pol was the leader, yeah. And I thought that was very, very cool. Now, of course, this is the first episode of the season. However, the episodes were aired out of order. Once again, the network and its infinite wisdom. If you want to know what order they're actually in, keep your eye on Mr. Chekhov's hair. Okay, because he goes from the horrible haircut to the good haircut, back to the horrible haircut, and then back again. Okay. But
was this the first? I'm sorry to interrupt, but was this the first season?
So this was the first episode that Chekhov appeared in, of course. At least chronologically as they were aired. Mirror, love that. You guys know I'm not a big fan of multiverses and alternate universes in general, but if you're going to do an episode of a multiverse or an alternate universe, this is how to do it, because it was just so much fun. I loved how, if you look closely, the ship itself has a lot of really subtle differences between the old ship and the alternate ship. One of my favorite moments in all of Star Trek, the original series, is that moment when Kirk is in the elevator and the door opens, he steps out and wham! He gets hit right in the face, and then has a big fight scene with the other guy. But the way he reacts is just golden. And then there's the scene where he and the rest of the people lost in the universe are fighting with Spock. And he does a move, that Kirk Fu comes into play. He does this move, the same move he does later, by the way, in Gamesters of Triskelion when he's a thrall. He does this move where he bends down and he headbutts into Spock's stomach. And then he raises his head upward, and headbutts with the back of his head into his opponent's chin. And I'm like, the guys who choreographed this stuff must have had a ball choreographing these fight scenes. Of course, Spock had a Vulcan bodyguard in Mirror. I thought that was quite cool. And I liked how they mentioned that Kirk had assassinated Captain Pike in order to become commander of the Enterprise. So again, just a great episode all around. Trouble with Tribbles, like everyone said, just fun. It's just so much fun. I love how William Campbell, who in the first season played Trelane in The Squire of Gothos, now plays a Vulcan commander in this episode. Now, Cyrano Jones, the guy who brought the Tribbles on board, that actor's name was Stanley Adams. He was literally in every TV show in the 1960s. He has over 200 acting credits, 212 to be exact. And one of his most infamous roles was he was the giant carrot man in one of the last episodes of Lost in Space, where he wore a costume that was so ridiculous that they literally had to write some of the characters out of the episode because they couldn't stop laughing on set. That was Stanley Jones. He was in literally everything. But yeah, just so much fun. And of course, you know how much fun people had doing Trouble with Tribbles is that the entire franchise keeps keeps going back to it. They can't stop going back to that one and to the Mirror Mirror episodes. So yeah, all three of those episodes were very good. One real quick thing on the season in general. Bringing Mr. Chekhov in, supposedly they were trying to appeal to a younger audience and get the teenagers to watch. But it also helped the fact that, if you may have noticed, that Mr. Sulu was not present for quite a few episodes this season. So it helped to replace him. And one of the reasons that Sulu wasn't there was they actually allowed George Takei time off to shoot a movie. So that was awful nice of them to do that.
Yeah, actually, what I noticed while watching, of course, Mr. Chekhov, Walter Koenig gets added to the crew, or to the cast, if you please. And what I noticed is actually it takes quite a while before you have an episode where all 7 members of the main cast appear together in one episode. I think it's almost episode 20 or something before we actually get to see all 7 of them in one episode. But just a side note. Last but certainly not least, giving his thoughts on those 3 classic episodes. Lord F. Men.
Well, you picked 3 bangers, that's for sure, in terms of Star Trek.
I'm the Grandmaster for nothing.
These are 3 like undisputed episodes that would appear on any Star Trek fans' lists, right?
Yeah.
So there's no contesting that all 3 of them are good. It's just for what reasons you actually like them. And I have to say, with Amok Time, that one was a tough one for me, seeing it for the first time, because they had sort of gone out of their way to create Vulcan culture as logical and very scientific, and that they really wasn't a lot of conflict the way sort of Spock put it together. But in any event, then you get to Vulcan, and there's like fights to the death over women, and you have like a super horny Vulcan. So I'm like, okay, they really wanted to go in the opposite direction and subvert all of our expectations the first time we get any exposure to what Vulcan looks like. But what I really liked about the episode, as Taylor pointed out, is that it's Leonard Nimoy who holds the whole thing together, because he could have really made that performance very campy. He could have gone the other way and started showing a whole lot of emotion, but he does it like as this super repressed, I'm having this problem. Could you all please just leave me alone and get me to Vulcan so that I can deal with my 7-year itch. And it's a really, really subtle and nuanced performance. Again, just picking up some of the commentary from Taylor. And that's where you get the in and you see how, wonderful the universe and the characters are. When they get on the planet and Kirk needs his triox and shirts are getting ripped and they're having to fight, you're like, we know this got written into the story because there probably was a need for some action and to kind of keep this like a 2-fisted TV show to a certain extent. But his rivals on Vulcan are very shrewd, cunning people. His fiance, trying to get out of, or his wife rather, trying to get out of the marriage with Spock so that she could, marry another suitor. It all came together in a way that it shouldn't have if you looked at the elements individually, but it just turned into like this incredibly wonderful episode. And with Mirror Mirror, I think I love that again because it subverts expectations. You've been watching the show for a little while now, and you kind of get the idea that we're in this post-scarcity utopia with the Federation and Starfleet and all of that kind of stuff. And then they take you to another universe that's like based on nothing but collusion and conspiracy and warfare. And you're like, okay, this is different. And Scott, I think it was Scott, Sulu, and Kirk. No. I'm sorry. It was Spock, Uhura, and Scotty. Was it? Which are the 3 characters that end up in the Mirror universe?
Kirk, McCoy,
and it was
Uhura, right? And I think Scott. Yeah.
Right. So those 3 people from our universe, or the universe that they seem more confused than like disgusted or irritated about the circumstances that they're in. They're like, okay, this is kind of weird. These dudes that do things weirdly. We just have to focus on a plan for survival and how to get back home. They're not interested in like, killing all these people or defeating them or trying to change their history. But it is interesting the choices the actors make in terms of their performances and the way the story is written. And I love the fact that Uhura at one point gets real comeuppance against Sulu, evil Sulu, in a scene on the bridge that always makes me smile whenever I see it in terms of how she handled him in that scene. But yeah, Mirror Mirror is a classic. Bearded Spock, beards mean evil. But even so, Spock is like still the same dude in another universe. He's like, I'm just applying my logic to brutality and savagery, and I'm going to be just as polite as I was in the other universe. So it's like, your agonizer, please. It's yeah, you really can't beat Leonard Nimoy for infusing this character with so much, ironically, humanity and sensitivity and nuance. There were a lot of different cliched choices he could have made based on what you read on the page, but he took it and really made it into something delightful. And then, of course, the trouble with tribbles. Again, you have to love that episode because it seems like it's supposed to be a break from all of the really serious and I guess more heavy issues that we were getting in Star Trek. It's kind of meant to be a little bit of fun, and there's some rough housing between the Klingons and Starfleet, and there's a lot of things that are played for comedy in there. The guy who just keeps drinking during the fight. A lot of it is just meant to be lighthearted and fun. And I'll be honest, I really don't understand the overall appeal of this episode to fans, but you really can't beat it in terms of being a beloved episode. And I like it too. But I would be lying to the committee here if I said that I honestly and truthfully know why. It's not the tribbles. I'll say
Maybe
was
it's a callback we get in a few years when we visit Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, but no great social commentary in that episode. No statement about society, unless they were talking about overpopulation. Uh, I don't know, like what else would have been the draw there if you were looking for deep political commentary. But
or maybe it's a commentary on that birth control can be a good thing.
Right, but impossible to implement if you are born pregnant. Right,
That's kind of a hassle, yeah.
The message was spay and neuter your pets.
Indeed.
Neuter your pets, indeed. Before I will let the panel choose their personal favorites. I have a follow-up from Lokismom.
Yes, we're talking about Anton Chekhov, and going back to bringing it back into when it first aired. Here again was this casting choice of putting this character, who would be opposed to America. This was the height of the Cold War. Russia was our enemy. We had our nukes pointed at each other. Back then, we didn't have all the communication and whatnot, and pretty much Russia was shut down. I mean, it was the Iron Curtain was real. We got a lot of information, but it was mediated, and so what was really happening. But we always had the impression, or I did, as a young person, that those people were living under like 1984 conditions. That's how their freedoms were, and they were just, and not only that, they didn't rebel. Those people seemed to want that, and we couldn't understand why those people would want to live that way. So when they cast Anton Chekhov as a Russian, here we saw that in the future, the hope that this conflict will be over with someday, that we can live as friends and work together. And so, yeah, he was just a very, I think, important, probably I think it's been maybe not recognized as much, but his casting was very, very important during that time. And of course, they kind of made fun of him because he would say, "Oh, yes, that was invented by Ivan Smirnikov," and then Spock would say, "No, that was invented by John Smith," And that was like the thing, because the propaganda was that the Russians were being told that they had invented everything. We invented everything over in Russia, in the Soviet Union, and the West just copies us. And that was kind of like the stuff that went on. But anyway, I thought I'd bring that up.
Yeah, I'm sure if you're talking to Russians, they will think was the other way around, that the Americans got the same propaganda about the same thing. But anyway, I don't think we need to restart the Cold War just yet.
I wasn't trying to do that, but not at all. I was just trying to let you guys know that was genuinely the feeling during that era.
Great comment. Taylor, you also had a follow-up.
Real quick, just in fairness, Star Trek was not the first. The Man from U.N.C.L.E., which was set during the Cold War, had a Russian character co-lead, Ilya Kuryakin. So just in fairness, they were not the first, but they were one of the first to do it.
Well, you're true. That's right. I stand corrected on that. But yeah.
Well, that's fine. Taylor, now we're talking anyway. What is or are your personal favorite episodes in the season 2 of the original series of Star Trek?
Well, I can't say they're my favorites because I love pretty much all of them, but some that I want to highlight that don't get talked about as often as I think they should, or at least that I would like them to. One is Friday's Child, which is the one where they beam down to the planet that has these tribal culture of these warlike people. They call themselves tribes, and they're the leaders, the tier of the 10 tribes. And there's a civil war that happens while they're there, and the tier is killed and replaced, and his pregnant wife. And in their culture, the wife belongs to the husband, and the child belongs to the husband. But yet Kirk and Spock and Bones try to help her and save her, and they actually, of course, help out the culture in general by kind of putting her child on the throne with her overseeing it in the end. But anyway, I just thought it was a really good episode. The action was really good. The costumes for the aliens were good. The kind of the unique weapons, the throwing weapons that they had. And also, of course, one of my favorite parts of this is the guest stars. So the Klingon agent is played by Tig Andrews, who had many great roles. But a couple of years after this, he would go on to the role that he was most known for, and that is playing Captain Greer on the Mod Squad, which was another one of my favorite shows growing up. And the Queen was, of course, played by Julie Newmar, who was also in many, many shows in the 1960s, but famously played Catwoman on Batman 66. And I thought she did a great job, actually, in this episode. So Friday's Child is one. Another one, now this one gets talked about quite a bit, but Journey to Babel is one of my favorite episodes. That, of course, is the episode where they have all the ambassadors on board, and then there's a murder mystery, which is kind of cool for Star Trek, that there's a murder mystery when the Tellurite ambassador gets assassinated. And I love that we see Andorians and Tellurites, which we don't see very much in the original series, but they come back at various points throughout the franchise. I especially like Andorians. And Spock's parents, of course, are also seen in this. And his father, of course, is played by Mark Leonard, who we saw in first season playing the Romulan commander. A couple other things about him. He did a lot of sci-fi in his career. He actually played a guerrilla, General Urko, in the Planet of the Apes series in the 1970s. He was a regular on that. And he was in an episode of Buck Rogers later in around 1980 time frame. But of course, we learn about the relationship between Spock and his parents. And then we learn about it's actually Orions who are behind the thing. So one of the things I love about this episode is so many different species and different cultures are at least referenced and mentioned and kind of established, at least to some degree, of who they are and what their games are.
Yeah,
So
it really broadens the universe of Star Trek in one episode.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then another one I want to mention is A Private Little War, which is the one where they beam down to the primitive planet where Kirk had been before with, he had a friend there named Tyree with the hill people, and then there were the village people, and then they find out that the Klingons are giving weapons to the village people, and I shouldn't say the village people, sounds like the band, but you know what I mean, the villagers. Sounds like the band, but not giving weapons to the villagers and using them to sort of conquer the planet. And apparently there's obviously some strategic reason that the Klingons want control and want to sow discontent. And of course, the whole thing, in addition to being a really fun episode with a lot of cool stuff, including the gorilla creature with the horns and just learning about the people. It's of course very much an allegory, not just for the Vietnam War, but for the Cold War in general. And it really does a good job of really establishing just how complicated and how dark the Cold War was. Some young people today think it didn't really happen, or think that it was like all paranoia and could have just wished it away, could have shook hands and sung Kumbaya and it would have gone away. No, it was real. It was danger. It was dangerous. The world was on edge. Bad things could have happened, and a lot of bad things did happen in different places around the world. And of course, Kirk comes to the conclusion that we have to give these other people weapons too. And of course, McCoy, being the emotional, empathetic, wonderful person that he is, thinks that's a horrible idea. And they have a really great scene where they discuss it. And there's going to be war for years. Who knows? How many will die? And Kirk comes back and says, "Well, what's your solution?" And Bones didn't have one. And that's kind of again, allegory for the Cold War itself. Nobody wants it, but how do we stop it?
Yeah.
So again, a good example of their allegory. Other good things about that episode, though, Nancy Kovac. She's a good thing about any episode. She of course played Nona, the witch woman. I can't remember the word they had, but she she had a plant that moves. It was moving by itself. She was not shaking it with her hand. It was moving all by itself. I just love that scene, that rubber plant thing that she puts on her thing. But Nancy Kovac was also in many, many shows and movies. She was in The Silencers with Dean Martin. She was in Tarzan in the Valley of the Gold. She was in Jason and the Argonauts, the Ray Harryhausen movie. She also did an episode of Man from U.N.C.L.E., Batman, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, etc. And she did like 5 episodes of Bewitched. So she was pretty busy in the 1960s. And I thought she did a really good job of being the Tyree's wife, and then she tries to, steal the phaser and try to give it to the villagers when Tyree doesn't want to fight. And so again, just a well executed and well acted episode. The only bad thing about the episode was the wigs that the aliens were wearing. the blondes for the hill people and the villagers with their crazy dark wigs that just looked ridiculous. But other than that, really great episode.
Yeah, you say that, but you can see, and maybe it's just me and I wanted to see, but the production value in season 2 is much higher and much better than in season 1. Immediately when in Amok Time, you can see it immediately. The effects are better. The Enterprise moving through space looks better. Overall, I think it's if you look purely for the aesthetics, it's actually really good for when it was made. The costumes may not always been. I mean, the ape-like thing with the horns all looked a little bit better than the Gorn from season 1, but still, it was. You can still see it was a man in the suit. But anyway, Lord Deathman.
One thing that always amazes me about this show and shows like it from back then, and even now, like. And not just broadcast shows, because a lot of broadcast shows today are just like police procedurals. They're just murder of the week, and they're kind of cookie cutter. This show had to be, they had to make 26 separate, distinct stories, all with sci-fi settings and sci-fi overtones. They all had to run the exact same number of minutes, and they all had to be produced on a very strict schedule to meet the seasonal requirements. Not like today, where these streaming shows tell one story over 8 episodes and drop them every year and a half or so. It was really a tough job that they had.
Yeah, nothing but respect for Gene Roddenberry and his crew who produced this show. Mr. Lord Deathman, I want to ask you about your personal highlights in season 2.
Absolutely. First of all, I have to start with the same disclaimer that Taylor did. It's an incredible season, and the vast majority of the episodes in it are incredible. But if I had to pick out 3 that were personal favorites of mine that I could watch over and over again, I'd have to start with The Ultimate Computer, which might seem like a really odd pick, but it's a really wonderful episode. It's entertaining. It has for an episode that takes place exclusively on the Enterprise, almost a bottle episode. It has so much depth to it. But the premise of it is that an eminent scientist, computer scientist named Dr. Richard Daystrom, he's brilliant but unstable. He introduces this new type of computer to the Enterprise. So the Enterprise gets called unexpectedly by an admiral or a commodore to some space station to be retrofitted with this new multitronic system of a computer that has some artificial intelligence. And the premise of the episode is that this computer is going to be able to take over the functions of many different human beings and separate individuals that you would need to operate a starship. And this was a very prescient concern of the day. There was a lot of technological advancement going on during the era in the 1960s. We were almost assuredly going to be reaching the moon in a couple of years. And people were really worried about the idea of technology taking over jobs, just as we are today with artificial intelligence. It's the same kind of a parallel.
I was about to say, I think this episode is as relevant today as it was back then. I mean, this is literally what's being discussed at the moment.
Yeah. Fear of obsolescence that would come through automation. That's essentially what the underlying theme of the episode was. But while that is a very strong theme in and of itself, which made for a great episode, to me, the character of Richard Daystrom, and Daystrom is a name that if you are a Star Trek fan, you know very well, because he is the father of computing and artificial intelligence in the fictional universe of Star Trek. There's an institute named after him, and he's cited with all these different accomplishments that made future technology in the Star Trek universe possible. But Daystrom, as an individual, when you see him in the episode, it's such a wonderful performance by William Marshall, who plays this brilliant but really troubled scientist who is isolated and doesn't seem to understand how to relate to human beings. He's kind of become immersed completely in his science and his experiments. And it seems like he's trying to recapture glory from his earlier career with a new invention like the M5 that's supposed to revolutionize things. I think his first invention was the isolinear chip, which made fast processing in computers possible. But he is such a pitiable character, but at the same time, there's a sensitivity that the actor William Marshall, who is just a brilliant actor, brought to the role. And I think that focusing on that character's isolation and his sort of existential problems was really a great route to go with. So at the end of the episode, he succumbs to a Vulcan nerve pinch while trying to reason with his computer on the bridge of the Enterprise. And Spock is like, even Spock, who loves the M5, is like, this isn't working out. we have to subdue this man. And the episode kind of ends with the triumph of humanity over machine life. And yeah, you will always need a human being to make those tough decisions, is kind of like how the episode ends. But there's a little bit of doubt. There's this tiny inkling of doubt that I think they keep in the episode, that we should be open to a future where humans might potentially have less to do. So definitely one of my favorites there. The next one that I'll bring up is the Doomsday Machine. Another great performance by an actor in that episode by the name of William Windom, who played Commodore Matt Decker. Just again, a mind-blowingly good performance. But the premise of the episode, just quickly for those who don't know, is a mysterious sort of ship that is massive in size when compared to Federation starships, just starts drifting through our galaxy. And it begins to destroy everything in its path, including planets, stars, and then it consumes the rubble and turns it into fuel to keep going, to prosecute its agenda. It's never really known what this Doomsday Machine is, who built it, where it came from. You're just kind of introduced to the idea that the machine is there and it's kind of traveling through our galaxy. And the Federation and Starfleet are determined to stop it before it reaches more populated areas and planets. So we never know, and that mystery always like stayed with me. Like, who built this thing? Like, where did it come from? Why is it here? But some things in science and you don't know. You don't know the answer, and they have to deal with it on that basis. But the Commodore Matt Decker character, he was on a starship, I believe, called the Constellation that had been destroyed by this doomsday device. And I believe he was either a sole survivor or maybe one of just a handful of survivors. And he really goes into mental shock, what we would call PTSD today. And the actor does this incredible job of just portraying that post-traumatic stress disorder and really showing that he is in distress, but he also just happens to be the ranking flag officer who can now take control of the Enterprise and command it to prosecute this sort of misguided agenda to try and destroy the thing with brute force, when in reality he just wants to kind of really get revenge for the deaths of his crew on the Constellation. But we get another great happy ending that really fit the episode, but still giving you a little bit to think about in terms of Commodore Decker's plight. He ends up doing a heroic sacrifice, I believe, at the end of the episode, and it's always been one of my favorites. Always stuck with me. And then my third, and this is going to seem like a really unusual pick, guys, but I also like the Metamorphosis. That was an episode that featured a character in the Star Trek universe by the name of Zephram Cochrane. And again, he's another very popular name in the fictional world of Star Trek as being the one who created warp drive, who made it possible for humanity to travel faster than the speed of light, get to other star systems and other, potentially other galaxies, to encounter other humanoid races and non-humanoid races for that matter. So he's really like the father, if anything, of Starfleet and or the grandfather, if you will, of that organization. And the episode, the premise centers around the idea that this far in the future, we all had thought that Zephram Cochrane had died just through natural causes. But it turns out that he had been stranded on a planetoid with some unusual properties. I won't go into too much detail there, but basically the gag is Zephram Cochrane is still alive and on this planet, and he has this kind of rugged individualist sort of tact because he's from the past, and he's fallen into a strange relationship, a romantic relationship with a non-humanoid being called the Companion. And that episode was really challenging to me because I'm like, as a younger person watching this, it's like, this is interspecies love. Like, what's happening here? But the Companion gets to take over a nice looking woman for Zephram Cochrane to become his, real corporeal companion. But I always thought it was a really challenging episode. I love the way Glenn Corbett played Zephram Cochrane. It was just, again, one of many great performances you get in the second seasons from talented guest players who are coming on it. And I like the way they kind of dug it far back into the fictional history of Star Trek by saying our creator of warp drive, Zephram Cochrane, who died, or what we thought was 100 years ago, was still alive. And it has a really great wink and a nod sort of ending. And I just loved all the overall performances. I love the special effects in that episode. I love the acting, the performances, but those are the three standouts for me as far as season 2 of Star Trek, the original series.
Yeah. Thank you for your comments. Before I go to Merv, Taylor, you had a follow-up?
Yeah, real quick, just to follow up on those episodes real fast. Metamorphosis, the other guest star was Elanor Donahue as Commissioner Herford, Federation Commissioner Herford. She, of course, had starred in Father Knows Best and had multiple appearances in the Andy Griffith Show. One of my Metamorphosis has a certain place in my heart because when I was a little kid, I actually had the book version of it, and I'm not even sure how to even describe the book. It just looked like a regular paperback book, but inside it was like a graphic novel, but with actual live screen shots from the episode and voice bubbles of the entire episode. So it was one of my prized possessions when I was like 8 years old or something. William Marshall, who played, of course, Dr. Daystrom, also great actor, had a lot of great episodes, but perhaps his campiest, he played Blackula in 2 movies in the 1970s. And William Windom from Doomsday Machine also played the President of the United States in Escape from the Planet of the Apes. And he also starred in a show called The Farmer's Daughter for 3 seasons before Star Trek.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
he
you.
also, if I can interrupt real quick on William Windom, he also did a series that didn't last long. It was called My World and Welcome to It, and it was based on James Thurber cartoons, and he plays a James Thurber-esque writer. So they integrated a lot of animation and whatnot, and he actually won an Emmy for that. But had low ratings, so I think it got canceled after 1 season. But just great actor, William Windom.
Thank you for your comments. Merv, you get to pick also your personal highlights of season 2.
Well, just a quick thought also on William Windom. He was the voice of Mr. Hatfield, the neighbor from Uncle Buck. Whenever Buck knocks on the wrong door and he hears like, "It's 2 a.m." That was that guy. So I found that out 4 seconds ago.
Okay.
Sorry, something just fell.
Lifetime Achievement Award.
Yeah. The 3 that kind of stuck out to me, and there's at least a theme a little bit with 2 of them, I think, but chronologically, not in order of preference necessarily, but the first one was Cat's Paw, which the thing that stuck out immediately was the atmosphere. I found out later that this was a Halloween episode, so that makes a lot of sense. I guess it aired on the 27th of October, which was right before Halloween, and the aesthetic in it is very much geared towards that. It is vintage horror, horror movie stuff. The heavy use of fog, the creepy castle, there's witches and apparitions floating about. It was just, it hooked me in right away as like this old timey horror movie vibe. And you guys probably know this already, but I'm a pretty big horror movie fan, so I just ate every bit of that up. It kind of dissipates a little bit halfway through, but then we get the weird stuff with like the oversized cat thing going on. So I guess a quick summary of the episode is people go missing on a planet, in case it seems pretty normal at this point for the crew of the Enterprise. But they get captured by these 2 powerful entities that are more or less all powerful, and they use what appears to be kind of like witchcraft to capture and show their power to the crew and whatnot, and until they get defeated by Kirk and heroes. But I don't know, I just love the creepy atmosphere, the nature of it.
Yeah, it also reminded me a little bit of the Squire of Gothos from season 1. It felt a little bit the same episode-wise, but the vibe was totally different. Like you say, it had more like a horror vibe to it.
Right. And I love too that, and this is a seemingly recurring thing, for someone who's just watching this for the first time, but the way that Kirk kind of starts defeating this is to seduce the woman, and that just it's that's his solution to every problem. Is there's always this powerful woman on the opposing team, and they just need seduction, and that's usually the first step in defeating the opponent is hey,
Star Trek is all about love.
Yeah. Which I thought
people
was
want
great.
romance in their entertainment, and
Exactly.
they treated each episode like its own little movie,
Right.
and every movie has to have romance.
Yeah.
And in the like big cat visuals at the end are dated, but I found them very charming. Like they use a lot of shadows to portray it, and that the sounds were great, but just the way that they show it's a normal cat, but they just zoomed in, and it's menacing everyone, including the other all-powerful entity. And then even when you get to see the entity, there's just kind of this moment of sadness to see what they really are, because they were just this small 6-inch like fuzzy multi appendaged little blue and yellow thing or whatever. It was just kind of sad. I wish they could have had a happier ending, but really like that episode. The second one, and this is kind of what I mean by maybe the same vibe, is the Wolf in the Fold, where essentially Scotty kills a hooker. That's how the episode starts. But that's, there's basically a serial killer who is out and about, and Scotty gets framed for it, or you're not sure if he's framed or if he's under possession or whatever. That's part of the whole mystery. But it basically is a murder mystery episode, which I really enjoyed as well. The big, I think, hook that really got me, because I love the murder mystery aspect of it, but the big hook that pulled me in was that it was kind of a supernatural entity that had done this for who knows how long, and they tied it to essentially Jack the Ripper, and they mentioned a whole bunch of other things, other names that this thing had gone by over the years, but they essentially say that this thing was Jack the Ripper on Earth, however many hundreds of years ago, and I thought that was a really cool switch up on it. It's not just a normal guy. It's like this, this evil entity that is, always out for, murdering particularly young women. So I just really like that whole story. And it was I guess a guest star is what they're called, but the guy who played what was his name, Hengist, who was essentially the villain of it. He was a guy I recognized, so I got happy there, because I don't always recognize something, these people from the '60s. It's a little bit.
That was John Fiedler, and
yes,
and he was in everything.
He was in also, everything, but
and also for many years he voiced Piglet in Winnie the Pooh cartoons.
Yeah, now that you say that, I can hear it. I can hear it in my head. But I recognize him from 12 Angry Men. He was one of the jurors in that movie. And he's easily distinguishable in that movie because of his voice. Actually, now that you mentioned Piglet, it all makes sense. But yeah, I really like that one. I love that Scotty just couldn't escape the framing of it. Every time anyone was dead, he was there with a murder weapon. I really loved it. The last one that really stuck out to me, and this might actually be my favorite one of the whole season, was By Any Other Name, which the crew of the Enterprise encounters this group. They're called the Kelvins, I guess. They're from a different galaxy or something, and they're basically just better at everything that the crew of the Enterprise wants to be good at, except whenever they got to deal with human emotions and that sort of thing. So they take over the Enterprise. They're like, we're going back home. It's not going to be, we need a ship to go back home, I guess, because all these all-powerful entities can't find a ship. I don't remember exactly why they lost it, but they're going to go back to their galaxy, and it's going to take hundreds of years, and they're not going to be there, but their children and their children's children, they'll eventually find a safe haven. But Kirk and company introduced them to some of humanity's, I guess, soft spots, if you will, including drinking and seducing women and that sort of thing. and it's just funny how the way to corrupt these people, the way to stop this is essentially corrupt them with, human emotions and, lust and, drunkenness and, emotions. And it's great. I love it. Also,
jealousy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so I guess that when these people turn into, they use a human form they're not used to. So they develop human emotions and they don't know how to control them, and that taints them. And now they can't go home because they'll just be seen as lesser than. And I think I fell in love with Barbara Bruce Shea, who played Kalinda there. The second she was on screen, I was like, there's a lot of very attractive women in this Star Trek series so far in seasons 1 and 2, but when they stick out, and she definitely stuck out for all the right reasons in this episode. So
partly because of her costume.
Well, yeah, the costume, especially when she turned around and you're like, wait, is she wearing a top? Because there was nothing back there. But yeah, definitely catches the eye. So yeah, those are my three.
Before I go to you, Lokismom, for your three or your personal highlights, you don't need to mention three. We have a follow up from Taylor.
Yeah, real quick, just to follow up for Merv, A Cat's Paw. It was actually the first episode produced for the season, but they held it until Halloween because they wanted it to be a Halloween episode, and it was the only official holiday episode of the original series. The costume worn by the male alien character, that robe thing, that was actually recycled. It had previously been worn by Bob Denver in an episode of Gilligan's Island in a dream sequence where they were doing a spoof of Cinderella, and he was the fairy godfather. Exact costume.
Well, people, if you like trivia, we're your guys. And Gal, of course, Lokismom, your last but certainly not least. Can I have your personal highlights for season 2?
Yeah, one in particular was called Return to Tomorrow, and the premise is that an alien life form that has been living disembodied for like 500,000 years has lured in the Star Trek crew because they need their bodies in order to build themselves new bodies, androids, I guess.
Yeah.
And it introduced Diana Muldaur to the Star Trek verse, and she plays several different roles. I mean, down through the years, but in this particular episode, she's a doctor who becomes the love interest and whatnot. And but another great thing about it was here again, it allowed Leonard Nimoy to do some more acting outside of being Spock. So he's being possessed by, or his body is taken over by just a slimy, just right off the bat, he's like a lounge lizard. He just slides up off that table, and well, look at you, Chaplin. She would love to have Mr. Spock actually give her him, but she's just ew. And it's no, this is not what she wants. But yeah, another thing about it, I think it goes to that trope, and it's kind of really popular, and not just in fiction, but it's kind of in our culture now about the ancient aliens, and did they help come back thousands of years ago, and are those the people we base our myths upon? And so they sort of play into that because he played the main disembodied person is called Sargon, which of course Sargon the Great was I think the first emperor of Akkad, in ancient Mesopotamia. So that's really referencing the Anunnaki, the sky people, the spacefarers and whatnot, that kind of keep playing again and again in all of our science fiction, mythical tropes and whatnot. So yeah, I thought that was a very probably not one of the best episodes that they did. It was very contained, very inside the ship. But I think it really, just by introducing Diana Muldaur, I mean, it plays an important part. The second one that I really liked, and it was the last episode of the series, and it was meant to be a pilot. And I think actually, when you watch it, when they do the credits and they Star Trek and zoom, 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 and then when it comes back after the commercial, they actually have the title of the guest star, Robert Lansing, up there, of course, and he was. The hope was that this would be a spinoff to another. It would have been great if they could have done that, because they would have had sort of the the Star Trek and Gary 7 on Earth in 1968. They could still be connected in a way. It also had Terry Garr. I think she maybe one of her first big parts, but she had been a go-go dancer, had appeared on a lot of these TV shows back in the 60s, and where they would be dancing in a cage and whatnot. She's a very good dancer, but then later on she got into acting and really went on to star in several movies and was in Tootsie, and I think she was at Stand By Me. Was she the mom in that? I'm not sure if that was of her or not, but she was kind of like that character in a lot of movies. And one of the things that I did like about Assignment Earth was that there's something else that maybe Paramount could look at rebooting, because that's would be an interesting storyline. I don't know if if they think if they've even thought about that, but I was thinking about it as I rewatched it. Oh, and another actor that's in that is by the name of he plays like the guy who, well, I wrote it down, but anyway, he's a character actor, another that just pops out, but he's always like you see him in a lot of movies or whatnot, where he's always the panicky guy. Oh my god, they're gonna go, and he just kind of pops out at that. I thought I'd give him a shout out, but I can't think of his name. Maybe Taylor can help me out with that. He's got his computer in front of him. But yeah, those two in particular jumped out at me, and two, I think I think that whole going back to returning back to Earth, from the future back to Earth and back and forth. I think that really gets played a lot out throughout Star Trek. And really, I mean, it's all in our science fiction and Marvel and whatnot today. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's the original franchise, as I mentioned in our trailer. Lord Deathman.
Yes, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the passing of Gary Graham, who played Ambassador Saval in Star Trek Enterprise, and he also played a character named Tanis in Star Trek Voyager. He passed away really recently, and is always an actor that I liked. And it's always a disappointment when an actor that you like passes away, but when one from the Star Trek franchise passes away, that's always a double downer. So, just wanted to acknowledge the great work of Gary Graham.
No. May he rest in peace. Well, we could have mentioned a lot more episodes, because season 2 is really stacked with great episodes. But I think we covered the most of it. Unless Taylor wants, Taylor wants to go out. Go ahead.
Sorry, we have to have one award. Okay, the award for worst idea ever goes to the guy who goes to a planet and says, "This planet needs help. I know, I'll turn it into a planet of Nazis." Yeah, really bad idea, guy. Should not have done that.
Yeah.
Oh, and we alien sex. I don't think we mentioned that. They have a lot of alien sex in Star Trek. So.
Yeah, or have a planet based on a book on Chicago mobsters. It's basically the same thing.
What I like about that particular episode, though, is that their mission is actually to go back to this planet because they know it had been infected by the Federation previously, before the Prime Directive happened, and their mission was actually to go and see what damage was done and try to fix it. And of course, they beam down into an episode of The Untouchables or something,
Yeah. And a nice piece of trivia: Lady Gaga based one of her looks in one of her video clips on an episode of Star Trek called The Gamesters of Triskelion, where the female guest star wears an outfit that she used in one of her video clips. But anyway, it's a simple.
The Thralls, Galt, the Master Thrall.
Yeah. Well, you hear it, people. We can talk about this season of Star Trek, the original series, forever, but we're not going to do that. This will conclude this month's episode of the Star Trek Project, actually, and we hope you have enjoyed our discussion. If you did, you can help us out. Like and share this review, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you really want more of us, join our forum at zakar.freeforums.net. We would love it if you do that. For now, I want to thank you all, also on behalf of our champions, and wish you to live long and prosper. Bye.